Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and Josh, I know you've been using the company credit card to pay for your hooers.
All right. You know, it's always interesting what kind of weird random aspect of a movie you will focus on to introduce yourself there. It's quite exciting.
I want the audience
not the one
to
I would
know
have expected.
That I would rather you use your personal stash instead of the awesome movie or corporate card.
Oh, do we have that?
I'm all for you getting horse. You know, whatever. Sex workers, I support them.
Okay.
I support your usage of them in a transactional type setting, but don't use the corporate card, Josh.
All right. So anyway, in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we've been talking about the films of 1999, and we are here at the Academy Award winner for Best Picture. Somehow, it is American Beauty.
I mean, even after watching this, like, and I don't dislike this movie. I'm just like, this is going to be a load for us to unpack here. So
yeah, it's, you know, regardless of whether you like this movie now or not, it's so crazy looking back and thinking this won 8 or nominated for 8 Oscars. This won Best Picture. It won 5 Oscars. It made so much money. Like this movie.
Yeah. 14 BAFTAs.
Yeah. You know? It's astonishing.
Nominations. Yeah. And I know you're going to get into it, but we had already covered, Sixth Sense, which was one of the other ones. For Best Picture. Green Mile, meh. You know, this was not a really strong year for such a good movie, or this is not a strong year for the Oscars, I'd say.
They nominated the wrong things, maybe.
I think you're right. The two that I mean, Cider House Rules, I think is a better movie than this. The best one nominated was The Insider. That movie's great.
That is true. I would agree with you there. That's far and away the best one. And I think of those, maybe that's the one that people remember now. I mean, I when I was researching this and I saw that, I was like, I forgot that the Cider House Rules even existed.
Good morning, you princes of New England, you kings of whatever.
It's good night. I think it's how he says good night to the orphans.
Kings of Maine, Massachusetts.
Yeah, I think it's like Maine, princes of Maine, and something like that.
Kings of New England.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's anyway. This movie
That's not what we're talking about.
No, it's not. This is American Beauty. So this movie, in addition to being nominated for all those awards, 8 Oscars,
best reviewed movie of the year.
And it made $356.3 million at the box office on its budget of $15 million. And a movie like this doesn't make that kind of money anymore.
No. And what's interesting is, Alan Ball, the writer, wrote this as a spec to get out of his TV work because he was writing like Sybil, episodes of Sybil.
Sybil is underrated. I loved Sybil when it was airing.
Wow.
Seriously.
I like Sybil Shepherd. I mean, last
Christine Baranski, that was like her breakout role. Yeah. Alicia Witt, also her breakout role.
That's a good trio. I'd like to see them all today on a show.
Yeah, it was a good show. I enjoyed it.
Alan Ball did not like it, Josh. He did not want to write
Sybil Shepherd, I think, is difficult to work with.
Yeah. But she's great in Last Picture Show.
Yes.
Anyway, so he wrote this as a spec script, not ever thinking it would get sold, but like more of like a calling card for like, hey, I can write movies. And then here we are, Josh, 22 years later.
Here we are indeed. And there he was winning awards. He won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. This also won Best Picture. It won Best Director for Sam Mendes, won Best Actor for Kevin Spacey, and Best Cinematography for Conrad Hall. Was also nominated for Best Original Score, Best Editing, and Best Actress for Annette Bening, but those they did not win.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I mean, well, 2 of those, I think you could argue they should have won. That Thomas Newman's score was great, right?
We can get into that later, but one thing watching this movie this time is I found the music incredibly annoying.
Okay, and we should get into that. And also, like, Annette Bening is wonderful in everything. She is a great actress.
She is a great actress, and I feel like her work has held up better than Kevin Spacey's, not just on a personal behavior level.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you. I think from an acting standpoint, he was one of the really good leading men that was out there, and I think his acting is always interesting. The personal stuff, I don't support it.
Right. No, and that's good. I'm glad that you've come out against that.
Yeah. Do you guys want to? No. Okay. You're for it. You're for it. Okay.
Right.
We'll leave that open.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I just think Annette Bening has just such a great, varied career, and she's just shown an amazing amount of talent.
She
and
flies
range.
under the radar too,
Yeah.
right? You never really consider her.
Yeah. So as you said, it was nominated. Was it 14 BAFTAs? It
Yeah.
won 6, including Best Picture, one Best Picture drama at the Golden Globes, all along with 2 others,
Yeah,
and a
Mendes
million
won
awards.
there. Yeah. Mendes and Spacey both won at the Golden Globes. So what you're saying, universal acclaim. There was really no one who didn't like this movie.
It really was almost universally acclaimed. And again, not only by critics, but it was huge at the box office. It wasn't one of these Best Picture winners that no one went to see.
Yeah, and like you said, Josh, it wouldn't happen today. And they did one of those cool rollouts like Sixth Sense. It was one of those word of mouth builds, right? A few theaters here, a few theaters there. Let it, kind of let the momentum snowball. And I love stuff like that. I mean, this movie aside, it had a really cool marketing plan, much like we talked about in our special Halloween episode, The Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, I mean, both Blair Witch and Sixth Sense were these word of mouth hits, and you could say that this was as well. And it did well with audiences. It got a B+ from CinemaScore, which is the audience polling service. And with critics, as we're saying, Roger Ebert and his guest critic, David Poland, they gave it 2 thumbs up. And Roger Ebert, in his review, said, American Beauty is a comedy because we laugh at the absurdity of the hero's problems, and a tragedy because we can identify with his failure, not the specific details, but the general outline. American Beauty is not as dark or twisted as Happiness, last year's attempt to shine a light under the rock of American society. It's more about sadness and loneliness than about cruelty or inhumanity. Nobody is really bad in this movie, just shaped by society in such a way that they can't be themselves or feel joy. And he also spends like a lot of this review defending the idea that Lester Burnham is attracted to a teenager, which,
I mean, like we said, it was universally acclaimed. It was accepted in society. Then, like, we go down this wormhole of like the societal changes. That's the whole podcast this week, right? But it is, it would never even get made today.
No, it definitely would not. But I mean, I think.
But would Lolita get published today?
Maybe not. And I don't know if you would be able to make a movie out of Lolita right now. But I mean, I think it was interesting to me, not only in this review, but in most of the other reviews and stuff that I read, that people saw Lester Burnham as sort of, if not a hero, at least someone to root for, a sympathetic protagonist.
He was at the time. He was.
I guess he was. But watching this movie, and to me, I thought, I don't know if I'm going to like this, right? Because this reputation has taken more so than any other movie from this era, I think, has just gone in the opposite direction. Well, I hated Crash to begin with, and I thought, I don't think I'm going to like this. But the thing to me about watching this now about Lester Burnham is like, Lester Burnham is a horrible person. And I could watch this movie and sort of still appreciate the movie with that perspective. That I don't know that that's necessarily the filmmaker's perspective, especially you read about Alan Ball's inspiration and things like that. I think the movie kind of endorses Lester, but I think you can watch it and hate him and still kind of appreciate the portrayal.
Well, Josh, as you know, I often reference in this season the Brian Raftery book, Best Movie Year Ever. This quote is from Sam Mendes. I love that Alan Ball never came down on one side or the other on Lester. In one sense, he's heroic, and in another sense, he's pathetic. And if you look across the films of that year, 1999, they were stories about outliers, the loners, the people that no one pays attention to. So we've talked about Fight Club. We will be talking about Dave's pick coming up, which also, kind of has these droll office workers who just kind of fly by the wayside. So, yeah, I mean, there was something in the air, I guess, of corporate America just sucking the life out of you at this point in time.
Yeah, I think those other movies have a much better handle on that, though. And especially in Fight Club, as we talked about a lot, where it's not endorsing the behavior of the characters and it is, in fact, satirizing them. And I think this movie is trying to satirize that corporate environment or the stifling nature of the suburbs. And Lester is like the guy who breaks through it all and is like a maverick, and he's terrible. He's just awful.
I mean, and this is what's interesting with all this reassessment of this film, like you were saying, right? Like at the time, like you said, he was the hero. Out of those movies, he's the one clearly by this box office that people most rooted for.
Yes, and that is horrifying. So I did look for some slightly more critical responses. Janet Maslin in the New York Times, though, was generally very positive. She said, American Beauty hammers heavily on the notion that nonconformity is needed here. That thought is repeated frequently and never carries a whit of surprise. But scene by scene, the film is full of its own brand of corrosive novelty. From the way Lester transforms himself in hopes of attracting the cheerleader, to the revitalizing effects of Carolyn's acrobatic affair with a fellow real estate agent. As these characters struggle viciously and hilariously to escape the middle-class doldrums, the film also evinces a real and ever more stirring compassion. As it detects increasingly vital signs of life behind the absurd surfaces that Mendes presents so beautifully, the film takes on a gravity to match its evil zest.
Acrobatic affair. Let's get into that.
Yeah, well, there is that one very enthusiastic sex scene between Annette Bening and Peter Gallagher.
Yes, beyond her prowess as an actress, she's clearly quite flexible in that scene. So it's interesting that Janet Maslin referenced that, Yeah, man. I mean, keep going, Josh.
No, I mean, I think she points another thing out here, that this movie is maybe a comedy. I'm not sure.
I think it is.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, again, I wasn't sure when I found parts of it funny now, if those were things that were intended to be funny, or they were intended to be like, Lester's triumphs or whatever, and I just was laughing at their absurdity. But maybe, I mean, some of it, and I think Ball and Mendes both had talked about how the tone kind of shifted for them as they were making the movie, and maybe it was meant more comedically at one point.
Yeah, and then it became darker in the edit with the soundtrack. But you can tell by Spacey's performance, like, he's playing it in almost, I don't want to say he's not mugging by any means. I mean, but he is very deadpan in that performance. And then he becomes more emotional and more invested as Lester does in life.
Yeah. But I do think also that some of the funnier things are things that are meant to be like Lester's breakout moments that show that he's taking control of his life, and it's just laughable.
Like what?
I mean, like when he buys the car and is telling off Carolyn.
I think in instances like that, what people liked, related to, or kind of lived vicariously through, was the idea of someone who has gotten to the point where he was able to scrape away everything, nothing matters, and he's just going to do whatever he wants, which is again a theme we've seen throughout these movies in this year.
Right. I mean, that's clearly what it's aiming for, or what people connected with. I just felt like it was almost the opposite, that he's not, I mean, he's just trading one sort of corporate capitalistic position for another.
Disagree with you there, Josh, because I mean, he already has the money in this severance package, right?
Well, but that's not going to last him for the rest of his life.
No, I mean, and he's not going to flip burgers for the rest of his life.
No, I mean, he does, because spoiler alert, he's dead.
Yeah. But Josh, what I'm saying is, it's not. Yes, he buys a materialistic thing, but it's a symbol of his youth, the dream car he always wanted when he was young.
It's pathetic that he's trying to recapture that.
Yeah, he's having the midlife crisis.
Right, which is funny, but I think the movie is presenting it as some sort of triumph.
Right. So the idea is not that he bought the car that's pathetic, it's the motivation behind buying the car. At the same time, if you've always wanted something and you finally attained the ability to buy it, isn't that like nice for you?
I mean, sure, but the way it's treated is not just like, isn't that nice that he got the car he always wanted, but that this is some sort of grand gesture against the oppressiveness of society that he bought a red sports car.
This is what I'm saying. A lot to unpack, buddy.
Yeah. So David Edelstein in Slate had a lot of good things to say, but I picked out some negative things. He said, American Beauty is so wittily written and gorgeously directed that you might think you're seeing something archetypal, maybe even the great American movie. But when you stop and smell the roses, well, that scent isn't Miracle-Gro. The hairpin turns from farce to melodrama, from satire to bathos, are fresh and deftly navigated, but almost every one of the underlying attitudes is smug and easy. The kind of detachment the movie is peddling isn't artistic. It isn't life. It's nihilism at its most fatuous. In the end, American Beauty is New Age nihilism. And I think the smugness of this perspective is really, and Lester, and also we should say Ricky is also horrible. And I think they both come across as these like entitled douchebags to me in this movie, which I can laugh at, but again, I'm not sure if that's the point.
I mean, everyone does in this movie. It's easy to pick on Lester.
Well, because he's the main character, right, and we see the most of him.
But every single character, except the Jims, right, or next door,
right, and the Jims apparently were meant to be satirical because they're represent the sort of gay counterculture going into suburban boringness, but I didn't see it that way. You're right. They were the only nice, good people.
Right, because we're reassessing 21 years later. At the time, Alan Ball was like, can we just have a gay couple act like any other couple, right?
Right.
So, which is interesting, yeah. So, but yeah, everyone's horrible in this movie, or has had horrible things done that have made them not even really act as humans anymore, as in Allison Janney's character. And I love Allison Janney, and she's very good. That's just very startling. What she does in this movie compared to everyone else it's very startling. It, really shocks you.
Right. And she plays Ricky's mother, who is kind of almost catatonic half the time.
Yeah, I wonder if, like we said, if there was a version of this today, she would probably be on Oxy or something like that.
Yeah, maybe so. And one of the things I'm sure you research a lot of these details, but I did see that she had a lot more lines in the script, and they decided to cut those out. And I think that works for that character. You get exactly the sense of how trapped she is by the way that she does not speak.
Right. I do think so too. And I think, look, whatever you feel about the movie now, like, they were able to craft something that connected in a big way.
That is true. It's clearly something that connected a lot with, again, not only critics and awards voters, but also audiences across this whole, across the spectrum in 1999.
And now I picked a quote from my favorite film critic, Josh, President Bill Clinton. An amazing film. Okay, we've got this nice, neat little suburban lifestyle and we're comfortable. And now what? I must say, it was also a disturbing movie.
I will say that Bill Clinton connecting with Lester Burnham is perhaps not surprising.
I'm so glad that you took that. It was like a nice setup and you spiked it down.
I mean, come on, right?
Good one. Good one.
Thank you. So, I mean, and to be fair, one of the people who connected with this movie strongly in 1999 was me. Like, I loved this movie when I saw it in the theater. I thought it was great, and I was with everyone else on it.
Yeah, I loved it too. And the first time I saw it again, I had mentioned, going to Boston University, and we got a lot of movies ahead of time because they wanted that college word of mouth. And this was one of them, and I loved it too at the time.
Yeah. Dave, did you see this when it came out?
Definitely. I don't remember if it was in the theater or at home. It must have been in the theater, though, since I saw it before the Oscars. So,
right. Yeah.
Back then, you didn't really get it back on streaming so quickly.
And
there was no streaming in 1999.
Exactly.
So you couldn't even get it.
No, yeah.
Right?
It's very,
even if you
it's
tried.
very frustrating.
Very hard.
Netflix had no movies in 1999.
DVDs maybe at Netflix?
I think that's what I meant.
No, not Netflix DVDs. DVDs existed.
No, but Netflix wasn't doing the delivery.
I don't think it started until like 2003, maybe.
Oh,
no, it definitely started when we were.
Oh,
in
maybe
college.
so. Okay, I take that back.
Hey, enough. Dave. So, did you like it when you saw it?
Loved it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so
There we go. So like it's all of society because we represent all.
We
of
do
society.
represent. Yes, we're so diverse here at Awesome Movie here.
Demographic, ethnic group,
all of it. Really,
geopolitical,
it's amazing.
Economic group, you know, whatever. We cover it, Josh.
But no, you're right. It was tough to find even slightly critical reviews of this from that time period.
Yeah.
So
even Mendes said that he wasn't surprised by some of the reassessment. He thought that it probably got too much praise at the time.
Yeah. Well, it's smart of him to say that. But I wonder also, though, so we all saw it when it first came out. And I know for me, I hadn't seen it again until the other day. Did you guys watch it again between then and now?
I definitely watched it a few times back then when it was still fresh, but this was the first time I'd seen it in at least a decade.
I mean, that would be my guess too. I don't have any recollection of seeing it again, but I probably, you know, had loved it so much in the theater that I had watched it once or twice on, you know, DVD or something like that, but I have no recollection of that.
Okay. No, I'm just wondering if like that shifting perspective kind of caught up with any of us before now. But maybe not. So, and any other background you want to share on this, Jason?
I have another quote from Sam Mendes about what he thought this movie was: a mystery story, a kaleidoscopic journey through American suburbia, a series of love stories. It was about imprisonment, loneliness, and beauty. So I think those are the things we're going to have to talk about.
That's a lot of things to talk about when we come back in a moment and get into our general thoughts on American Beauty. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1999, we are talking about the Academy Awards Best Picture winner, American Beauty, from a first-time screenwriter and a first-time film director, Alan Ball and Sam Mendes. And I mean, regardless of anything else, what a way to debut.
Yeah, it was a huge deal, man. I mean, you know, people like Robert Zemeckis were offered the movie and turned it down. And
imagine this movie directed by Robert Zemeckis. Who would have been an entirely CGI creator?
Yeah,
we would have a CGI. Would there be a motion capture plastic bag or?
Yeah. So the one name that I did, they said they went out to like 15 or 20 directors, and Ball was one of the people who, you know, kind of wanted to keep it new. The one name that I thought was interesting was Mike Nichols. He would have done an awesome job with any of this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can see echoes, as we've talked about weirdly in multiple episodes this season, echoes of The Graduate here.
Amazing. I think we need to critically reassess our episode on The Graduate, which is so influential on everything of this year.
Apparently, yeah. I liked The Graduate. I mean,
I liked it too. I just don't love it like everyone, you know, does.
Well, obviously, I would imagine that Alan Ball probably loved it, or, you know, was influenced by it in writing this film.
I mean, Alan Ball, David Fincher, again, it crosses boundaries, Josh.
Totally does.
But yeah, what were we talking about here, Josh?
The possibility of Mike Nichols directing this film.
Well, I mean, right. None of these, even Spacey at the time wasn't a big star, right?
I guess, although he'd already won an Oscar for The Usual Suspects. Yeah. So like, how bigger of a star did he need to be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, this probably sent him into the stratosphere of like leading man stuff. And like we said, Annette Bening, which I think Mendes just offered her the role without studio approval. And
smart move, Sam Mendes.
Yeah, she's great. I mean, but again, she's never a big name. She's just a working name that we all know, right? And all the teenagers were kind of unknown. So so I don't really know, Josh. Everything about this movie is tough to place. And like you said, it was a phenomenon that broke through, and everyone became much bigger because of it. And you know, in the legacy section, they're all still working.
They are. And various levels. But I mean, and in reading a little bit about the evolution of this movie, and as we said, the like tone of it kind of changed as they were working on it. It's amazing that it worked out at all, really, with, you know, these first time filmmakers and some of these chances that they took. And I don't know, to me, reading about some of the alternate approaches here, whether they were things in the script that weren't used or things that they shot that were edited out, every one of those things I'm thinking, well, that was a terrible idea. Like, the good thing they got rid of it, but how did they, you know, end up with something that worked?
Right. They seem to make a lot of right decisions, right?
Almost randomly, though.
Yeah. So, Josh, about that, Mendes obviously was a very famous theater director at this time. He had done The Blue Room with Nicole Kidman and the current versions of Oliver and one of
Cabaret, your
Cabaret. That
favorite
was
Bob
his,
Fosse.
yeah, that was his big thing. And so they all liked, Spielberg really liked, because it's a DreamWorks movie, what he was able to do on stage. But one thing we have to credit Mendes with is he really kind of collaborated really well with Conrad Hall, legendary cinematographer we talked about on Cool Hand Luke. But he didn't even want Conrad Hall at the first. Tom Cruise had to convince him to get Conrad Hall. So again, it's like all these things that could have gone wrong seem to have not gone wrong. Of the elements you're talking about, there was a flashback scene with Colonel Fitz,
the Chris Cooper's character.
yeah, where we see, he, was attracted to another Marine, and that Marine gets like blown up and killed. And they didn't show that. In the original ending, Lester and Angela have sex. And I think,
yeah, that's one of those moments when I was watching the movie this time, and it's been so long, I remembered certain things, but I was trying to remember, do they or do they not have sex? And as we get to that scene where they are about to, I thought, God, if they have sex, like this movie is just whatever I'm holding on to with it, it's lost me. And at least they made the 100% right decision, not only for like people, but for the story, where if you want the idea of Lester kind of having that awakening, he has to realize like, no, you should not have sex with a 16-year-old virgin.
Right. He's got to go back. He's got to realize he's not that.
Right. He's not that guy. And maybe being attracted to her was the catalyst for his awakening or whatever, but he should not actually have sex with her.
And then the other big element, which was that, that opening scene with Ricky and Jane and the camcorder, like, my dad is so pathetic, we should just kill him. Do you want me to? Yeah. And then the ending is them on trial for the murder of Lester,
which is just such an awful idea. And I was wondering, because that is something that they actually shot and then cut out. And I was wondering if those deleted scenes, they weren't on the DVD that I watched, but I wonder if they're out there somewhere. I would be curious to see them, just because there's just such a bad idea.
Well, I know, but so I mean, like, is it Mendes? Is it Spielberg? Is it Ball? Like, whoever's making these decisions, they're doing good jobs to like carve away the fat and get to the right movie for themselves.
Right. No, I suppose that's true. I mean, you could argue that, well, they also made the wrong decision in the first place by coming up with those ideas.
I mean, did they though? Because there were 10 drafts of the script, right? So in the drafts of the script, the flashback, which they might have shot, was in there. Those two other elements were already in there, and they still got this project to where it is, right? So things evolve, things change. Yeah, it is. It's a real mystery.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think some of those aspects are still like, no, they don't have those scenes of Jane and Ricky being on trial. But one thing I found really unsuccessful this time was anything that set this up as like the mystery of who killed Lester Burnham.
One thing I found really unsuccessful was everything involving Jane and Ricky. I didn't believe any of it. I agree with you. I don't know. Wes Bentley almost played him, as having no ability to emote in any way, And Thora Birch, who I like, the character, there really wasn't much to the character except, you don't understand me, Dad.
Yeah. That whole thing. I mean, again, as insufferable as Lester is, he's more obviously that way. And you could argue that the movie is presenting him as sort of a buffoon in some senses, but Ricky is meant to be like the profound heart,
the voice of the people.
And he's awful. He's such a dick. And like the fact that he is, spying on Jane essentially and filming her without her consent is presented as this like, oh, but he's just so in love with the beauty of the world. And she, falls for him. And no, he's a creep. I mean, the Angela, Mena Suvari's character, is meant to be this kind of superficial, bitchy cheerleader or whatever. And she says all these mean things about Ricky that I think we're meant to disagree with. But I was thinking, no, she's right about him.
Everyone can be right about everyone in this movie.
Pretty much,
but,
yeah.
99, right? Like American Pie was 99. Mena Suvari was in that. And there was another, one of the big scenes was the the Jason Biggs, Shannon Elizabeth scene, the webcam scene, which again, this, it's a different society now, right? That was played as comedy. Now it would be a criminal endeavor.
And it should have been then, but right. But I mean, Ricky's Habit isn't played as comedy even. I mean, you could almost
right. He's so serious,
right? You could almost excuse that in American Pie by saying, well, we're laughing at the behavior of these characters, but here it's Ricky is supposed to be this, sort of enlightened soul, and he's not.
And I want to get back to that, but I do want to talk, Chris Cooper and Allison Janney, who, come on,
they're great actors.
You can't get better than those two, but it feels like they're juxtaposed from a different movie into this thing, and maybe that's how it's supposed to be, but it definitely seems like their world is very different than the rest of the film.
Right. Chris Cooper, who plays Ricky's dad, is this Marine veteran, or it wasn't clear to me if he was a veteran or he was still in the Marines, because he always introduces himself with his rank.
Well, yeah, I think he's just a retired military man who identifies as military.
Yeah, he identifies as military because he can't identify as gay
or bisexual,
right, or whatever is going on with his sexuality that he's clearly repressing and taking out all of his anger at himself on Ricky, who isn't gay, but the father is so afraid that his son could turn out to be gay or just different in any way that he beats him and he sends him to a psychiatric institution and all this stuff. And then, of course, he is the catalyst for that, whatever we want to call the mystery of who killed Lester Burnham, because spoiler alert, it was him.
Yeah. What's interesting is if you did that kind of story today about a parent who had such a hatred built up for his kid being gay, like you would be like, yeah, there are people like that out there, but like that's a very passé subject at this point in time. And like, hooray, like we're actually evolving as a society. Right?
No, yeah, that's good. And I mean, I suppose you could argue that some of the reason that this movie doesn't work anymore is because its attitudes are outdated, and that is good. But even in reading reviews, I mean, and Janet Maslin mentions this in her review, that even in 1999, a lot of the themes here were old, were rehashed. They weren't fresh.
What do you think? Which themes do you think those are?
Well, I mean, I think the theme of you're saying that if we had that character now, the repressed gay father, it would seem quaint or whatever. But I think the idea of that kind of character type was still very familiar here. Or even, if we want to talk about The Graduate again or whatever, the person stifled by suburbia who's going to break free from it. This wasn't a movie that invented that idea.
No, it didn't. But like we said, there were plenty of other movies of this year that were working into that theme as well.
Right. I mean, to me, this movie feels, I guess that's another thing, is that this was such a sensation, but it feels not very original in any of the character types
but clearly it had to be at the time, right?
I mean, I don't know that it did. Just because it was successful doesn't mean that it was original.
Maybe this goes into the legacy, but I think part of that is because this was done over and over and over again in the years following it.
I agree with that.
That's true, but I feel like this had also been done in the years prior, and I think that is borne out when you read some of these reviews from the time period.
That's why I think the tone and the music all played part of that, and the cinematography is really, really good. You can't hate on Conrad Hall, Josh.
No, he's very talented. And I think you're right that, again, whether you like it or not, the tone and the sort of structure of this are what people were drawn to, the performances, all of that.
So, Josh, I said three things I really like: the cinematography. Four things. I like the use of the rock music to kind of showcase the youthification of Lester there,
right, music which now sounds like old person music,
right? Baba O'Reilly, but again, that's been played in everything since then, right? I love Peter Gallagher and everything, even though he's got a small part here,
sure, he's a very enthusiastic lover, as we noted.
Buddy King. Buddy Kane.
I think his name is Kane, but he calls himself like the king of realty.
And I think Annette Bening shines in this, and I'll throw one other thing in that scene where the two of them go through the drive-through at Smiley's. I thought that was a very effective and funny scene. And Lester just accepting and, hey, I get it that you're having an affair. I don't really care. Do you want Smiley sauce with it? And just how little it means to him. I thought that was probably the best scene in the movie for me.
Yeah, that is. I mean, that is an amusing scene, but I feel like almost anything, it ends up being like overplayed. Like everything is drawing attention to how important it is, and
No, that is important. That's the break from, that's the end almost
yeah, I
of
mean,
them.
it is close to the end of the movie, but I mean, not just important for the characters, but like important as like a thing for the like as an important statement about the world and about
Right.
life and
But
stuff.
that's the whole point, isn't it, of this movie? That
It
there is
is,
a
and
lot
that's
of,
what I find annoying about it.
yeah. Well, I'm just trying to throw out some positives of the movie.
Right. I mean, and
right?
I didn't
So-
hate this. We've talked about some Best Picture winners like Forrest Gump that I just loathed. And I didn't. I came into this kind of thinking, I think I may hate this just from the reputation that it's gotten over the years. And it seems like this is something that I won't end up liking. And I didn't hate it. I wasn't blown away by it by any means like I was in 1999, but I felt like there were things to enjoy. And I think, again, the main thing for me was watching this movie with the perspective of these are all terrible people and we're watching them sort of self-destruct. And I found that amusing, which is not the point of the movie, but is kind of what I got out of it this time.
Gee, Josh, how many seasons have we had of the Kardashians since then? And shows like that? Have we not had the reality television of America where we're seeing horrible people self-destruct on TV all the time now?
I mean, I don't watch that stuff.
I don't either,
generally.
but I think that's part of the point is like we were moving because Ball said like part of the inspiration was the Joey Buttafuoco, Amy Fisher scandal, right? And like how she was vilified for the whole thing. And she should have been vilified for, shooting a woman in the head.
Yeah, no, that's bad.
But he should also have been vilified for, having an extramarital affair with a high school girl, right?
Right. And that's a big thing that we're having now is kind of a reassessment of a lot of those 90s scandal subjects, whether it's Amy Fisher or Lorena Bobbitt or Monica Lewinsky. And, here you might reassess Carolyn or whatever, who I think is set up as more of the person to hate in this movie.
But she does,
Lester.
she's not a good person either, is she?
No, she's not. She's not. But I think the dichotomy that the movie sets up is that she's bad and Lester is triumphing over her. Whereas to me, watching the movie now, it's like Lester is terrible and she's also kind of terrible, but not as bad as Lester and is at least trying to kind of accomplish something and hold her life together. But no, she's not a good person.
Okay. I'm not defending Lester in any way, but I'm saying like she is a worse or at least as bad a parent as he is. I mean, she's horrible to Jane.
She is not trying to sleep with her daughter's best friend.
Sure, that's what I said. But she's also diminishing her daughter at every point in time.
True.
Or at least Lester is, from time to time, like trying to regain a relationship with his daughter.
That is true. And she's not a good she's definitely not a good parent and she's not a good wife. I mean, she does cheat on Lester, even if he doesn't treat her that well. But I found more to sympathize with from her perspective than from his, even if she's overall not.
Well,
good.
that's what I'm saying. I don't know if there's anyone to sympathize with in this movie.
There's no one to
except
fully
the Jims.
Yeah,
right.
They're
there for like 1 minute.
Right.
And how about the John Cho cameo as one of the potential home buyers?
Oh yeah, I didn't even notice that until I saw his name in the credits.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think overall you're right that none of these characters are sympathetic really when it comes down to it.
The teenagers aren't like, I mean, dude, a few years later, Thora Birch would go on to make Ghost World. That's a much more interesting character. Right?
It is. And like you say, Jane is not, she's just exists to kind of react, whether it's to react to Lester or react to Ricky or even to Angela or to Carolyn, even to some of the female characters. She doesn't really have anything in terms of like agency on her own.
And I think that's, that could have been explored a little differently because there are, especially teenagers who don't have their own identity, who are trying to, Mean Girls, for instance, right? Trying to fit in one way or another and have to, find their identity through other people of what they think is right or wrong and then learn for themselves.
Right. And that seems like almost what she's doing. She starts off and she's best friends with Angela. And it seems like she's kind of goes along with what Angela says or does. They're on the dance team together and she agrees with Angela about things. And then she meets Ricky. And then it's almost like her personality changes and she just becomes the girl that Ricky wants. And so she never really comes into her own here.
Yeah, I want to talk about one other thing, Josh. We have to talk about that plastic bag scene. And like, is this the most overly hyped scene in the history of cinema?
Yeah, it's laughable. And again, I feel like watching that.
Right, it feels so amateurish. Dude.
Yeah, it's and I just think like that scene, you hear what Ricky says and you're like, this dude is an idiot. And it's funny that he's an idiot, but that's not what it's meant to be.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It was, there's so much beauty in this world that my heart can't take it sometimes. Right.
Why did that scene work back then?
That's what I want.
Well, I think I have an answer for you.
Yeah.
And it's something that Josh didn't like, but Jason did like, and I like too. And that's the Thomas Newman score. I think that's why that scene connected so well back then.
Yeah. Sometimes there's so much beauty in the world. I feel like I can't take it and my heart is going to cave in. Ricky.
And you know what's funny about that is that apparently that scene was inspired by an actual experience that Alan Ball had staring at a plastic bag for 10 minutes. And I'm just imagining this dude standing on the street, staring at a plastic bag for 10 minutes.
I have a question. Alan Ball, we know, is gay. If he was straight, do you think there would be a backlash of toxic masculinity towards him about this movie?
I mean, I think there is some of that anyway. I mean, just because Alan Ball is gay, not everyone else involved in the film was gay. And that doesn't even if they were, that doesn't mean that you can't have that perspective in the film. So I think so. I mean, and I think, this is outside the content of the film, but I think Mena Suvari has talked about being uncomfortable and Thora Birch has talked about being uncomfortable, filming those scenes. Thora Birch was underage. Right. She had to get her parents' permission.
Then the parents were on set and, all that stuff. They, look, whatever you want to say, they at least went through the proper safety precautions. Right?
That is true.
But I had thought it was with Thora Birch, she was all in on it. She's like, this is the character I want to play. And she felt that was an important part of the character and everything.
Maybe that was the case at the time. Maybe I'm confused. I know Mena Suvari has talked about it recently because she has a memoir out and I think she was uncomfortable. But I think regardless, like, you don't need to show those actors naked to get across what this movie is conveying. And especially if the ultimate message here is that Lester is wrong and shouldn't have sex with Angela, which he realizes rightly at the end of the film. Why is the movie then sort of wallowing in that lurid perspective about by showing her like that?
Well, I will say, if I was going to, one, I would say that's probably some of the best acting Mena Suvari's ever done in that scene. And two, I think it's the vulnerability of being nude, right? There is a real vulnerability about that.
Well, right, but it's not like we don't know that she's nude. I'm not saying she should have kept her clothes on. I'm saying they didn't need to show it. Yeah. And especially the Thora Birch scene where it's really superfluous when she takes her top off there to show that.
Do you think so? Or do you think it's like a teenager, trying to titillate and express her sexuality?
I mean, again, I think showing it to us, the audience.
Okay. I'm looking at the emotional, side, like the emotional motivation of the character.
Yeah, and that's true. But I think there are ways to frame those scenes that didn't need to show those actors naked in a way that sort of adopts Lester Burnham's perspective or Ricky's perspective, which are gross, unpleasant perspectives to take.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack on this one, Josh.
Yeah. So
Josh, what you name a thing or two that you did like from there?
I did like Annette Bening's performance. I think, there's a lot of like broad elements to this character. But she made it feel real to me. I loved Annette Bening's hair. I feel like she is the proto Karen here in her haircut.
Dude, how great is the scene where she's driving and singing "Don't Rain on My Parade" and like you can see all the different emotions that she's like, that hope and hatred all in one there. She's really good.
Yeah, she's great. I mean, and to me, she's the best performance in this film. So I liked her a lot. I thought some of the sort of sarcastic comments were kind of funny. The cinematography is good, as we mentioned.
Not just good, but it's really effective to kind of elevate the emotions of the scenes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think my perspective here was not as much like, oh, I liked this and this and this. It was, I didn't hate this in the way that I kind of thought that I might.
Yeah.
So that's the most positive I can get here.
Well, then why don't we rate this thing, Josh?
Sure. Should we rate it out of
5 plastic bags
I
blowing
guess
in the
we
wind?
might
Is
as
that
well,
is
yeah.
that just too
Yeah.
obvious?
No. Well, is something too obvious? Then it's perfect for this
Yeah.
film.
There you go. Man. Yeah, man. I mean, there's enough good stuff in here where it's at least a 3. I don't want to go higher than that. Maybe
Okay.
3.25.
Oh man, you're really ripping those plastic bags into little
like
pieces.
but you know what? It's 3.25, but that other 0.75, I'm gonna recycle that part of the plastic bag.
Okay. I give it 2.5 plastic bags. Because again, I didn't hate it. I can appreciate some of what it's aiming for, but I think it just is maybe better left in 1999. So, Dave,
I keep going back and forth between 4 and 3.5, but I think I'm going to stick at 3.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now let be real fast because we
Yes.
also we loved it when we. What do you think you would have given it on your original viewing?
I mean, I think I would have given it at least 4 stars. Like, I don't know that I made like a top 10 list when I was in college in 1999, but I'm sure it would have been on there. And if not for Fight Club, which we, as we talked about in our previous episode, which I thought was just the most brilliant, this was probably close on there. So
I'd give it a 5 back then. And this is an embarrassing admission, but this movie was kind of my like gateway into watching dramas, basically. You know what I mean?
It's not embarrassing.
it led you to better stuff.
Yeah, it led me to better stuff. Absolutely.
So, I probably would have gotten 4.5 from me back then. And I have a funny story to tell about that in the legacy section.
All right. Well, we'll come back then and talk about the legacy of American Beauty. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1999, we're talking about Best Picture Oscar winner American Beauty. And I think part of the legacy of this film is the fact that everyone loved it and now very few people love it.
Who still loves it?
I'm sure somebody still loves it.
Yeah.
I mean, Dave still loves it,
Yeah,
right, Dave?
I liked it a lot. I may stop short of love, but it's great.
I know. No, that's cool. I'm glad that you're sticking by it if you feel that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are people who, especially people who maybe don't pay attention closely to critics and especially to critical reassessments or whatever, who just would come to this and enjoy it and not think about that.
You know, what's interesting is, and we've talked about this a few times on the show, like we try our best and I think we all kind of believe like in the gig and how we want to watch movies. We want to separate the art from the artist, And I think when we did Annie Hall, it was easier because Woody Allen started before we were born. Kevin Spacey, because like we kind of grew up with him as, Usual Suspects, and then this is a much tougher one to separate for me.
This is, but weirdly enough, as I said, for me watching it this time, I sort of appreciated it because I could think of Lester as being this total creep. And I feel like the fact that Kevin Spacey is a creep in real life actually made it easier for me to view the movie that way and appreciate the movie as this examination of a terrible person.
Well, yeah, sure. But at the same time, like we know he's a good actor and he doesn't have to play a creep to be,
No, he doesn't. But I mean, what he does in this movie is play a creep.
I do want to say this at that screening that I was at Boston University, the cast was there. Always exciting.
Yeah.
Right? And, they did a Q&A afterwards and everyone's asking questions about the movie. And one student got up and said, "This question's for Kevin Spacey. How does it feel to be the coolest man alive?" And, and everyone clapped.
And that student was you.
No, it was not. But I mean, and everyone clapped. And, Spacey, very charming, said, it's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. But like, he was a darling for years,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. He was. I mean, he won an Oscar for this film. People thought he was brilliant.
And not just that. I mean, we talked about House of Cards. Like, he is a catalyst to the entire streaming television revolution.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I agree with you. He is a very good actor who gave a lot of very good performances. I think in this context,
right, you're saying
his creepiness kind of comes out in this film.
And that's what I mean. It's tougher to separate the art from the artist on this one. Josh,
Right.
What do you think of I like the alternate casting. A few names for Lester: Bruce Willis, 99, maybe.
Yeah, we talked about in The Sixth Sense, 1999 Bruce Willis was good.
Yeah, and I think he definitely had like Well, Kevin Spacey had that more everyman thing, but Bruce Willis had more of that like guys want to be this guy. So that could have been interesting. Although I don't know if I would have believed, how just kind of sad sacky he became, and that Carolyn, is having an affair. I always can believe someone's having an affair. Kevin Costner, not very good at comedy.
Yeah, but I feel like Kevin Costner could have made this interesting.
Here, and I think I'm talking about the 1999 version of him. John Travolta, I think, could have done a good job.
Yeah, even by 1999, I don't know.
Here's an interesting name: Chevy Chase, 99.
No, Chevy Chase of any year. I don't
80?
think.
You don't think 80?
No,
84?
Chevy Chase is not. Even if you are like, oh, Chevy Chase is hilarious, he's not a good dramatic actor.
All right, so some other ones for Carolyn, Helen Hunt. I don't really. She's very acclaimed, but I'm not.
Yeah, I don't like her either.
Holly Hunter, she's great at everything.
She would have been great in this, yeah.
And then Angela, we've all said how much we like Kirsten Dunst. She would have done great. But like I said, I think this is Mena Savari's probably best performance.
Yeah, it was a big breakout for her. So, as you said, a breakout for all of these people, really. Kevin Spacey, of course, had the biggest career going out of this. Became just this big, major leading man star for many, many years after this movie. And not so much now.
He's back, though.
Not as a leading man, though.
He's got 3 movies coming out.
Yeah, he's back in the sense of, and we might have talked about this when we talked about him in the Ref a while back, where no matter what terrible thing you've done, some opportunistic producer of a low budget movie will hire you in order to get publicity for their movie.
But I will say this, like the ones that I read about sound like interesting projects that he could have been doing, back in the day,
I don't know. They're all on such.
Do you know what they are?
Well, I know he was working with Franco Nero in an Italian film. That was the first thing was announced.
The Man Who Drew God. Faye Dunaway is in that, and it's about I think like a police sketch artist who can hear voices, like the voice of a suspect, and is able to draw them accurately from that. That's kind of interesting. He's playing Gore Vidal in Gore.
No, he's not. That was something that he was doing before he got canceled, and that movie is never coming out.
Oh, okay. And then some movie called Peter 5'8".
That he's also doing, which is just some no budget independent film. And it's not to say that Italian film isn't a good concept, or this. I don't know what the plot is for this Peter 5'8", but they're not big movies. And nor are they movies where he's playing the lead role. They're hiring him is like what Bruce Willis does or whatever. Yeah, it's the stunt casting so that they can get publicity.
But what's interesting is when we talk about Bruce Willis in that regard, it's just like or Nicolas Cage or whatever, right? Although we like Nicolas Cage, like they're hiring him for that stunt casting aspect, but none of them have the baggage Kevin Spacey has.
No, that's true. That's true. But I think it's sort of the same concept of we get this recognizable person here and it gets publicity for our film. And in these cases, it has this sort of added controversy. And, I'm sure those people are willing. Franco Nero, at least, I think, talked about how, Kevin Spacey doesn't deserve to have been,
Right.
These are people who are also maybe making some kind of
Sympathetic to him,
political
yeah.
statement here by doing this.
So I really wanted to see Georgetown, that movie with Annette Bening and Christoph Waltz. Did you ever see that?
I didn't. Yeah, that was a recent movie that Christoph Waltz also directed.
Yeah.
I didn't, but as we said, Annette Bening is great. She was nominated 4 times for Best Actress, also for The Grifters, for Being Julia, and for The Kids Are All Right, in addition to this, but has not won. I loved her not that recently, I guess, but most recently in 20th Century Women, which I think is just a great, great movie overall. And she was in Captain Marvel, so she got swallowed up into the Marvel universe too.
That's okay. She's doing Death on the Nile. That's another franchisey thing that broke out. And then she's playing Diana Nyad, the woman who swam from Florida or Cuba to Florida. And then something called Jerry and Marge Go Large, which is another kind of true story thing.
Yeah, she'll
awesome.
Continue doing great work, I'm sure.
So let's see. Wes Bentley works regularly in TV. He was in Mission Impossible Fallout. I think he's done better since this movie.
Yeah, well, he had a lot of drug problems when he was younger, like right around the time of this movie, I think, and really fell off for a while. But yeah, all of these, the teenage actors, Wes Bentley, Mena Suvari, Thora Birch, they all kind of have similar careers right now. They work steadily in like TV and
Or
supporting roles.
Yeah.
None of them are huge stars at the moment, but they seem to be steadily working.
Chris Cooper, Dave, has this movie called Light on the Broken Glass coming out that sounds very Charlie Kaufman-esque. I thought you'd like to know.
Him in adaptation is so good.
Yeah, Chris Cooper is great, is fantastic.
Do you have an underrated Chris Cooper movie that I've mentioned Breach on this show a lot? But,
right. Well, I mean, we talked about Lone Star.
Yeah,
that's a great film.
October Sky, him and Jake Gyllenhaal. Right?
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that. And of course, Sam Mendes, after debuting with this, is this huge A-list director.
Yeah. How do you rank his movies? Like, and not, let's leave out the Bond. Well, you can put in the Bond.
Well, see, what I was going to say is that Skyfall, I think, is his best movie.
You do?
I really do, because I think as a director of dramas, a lot of the kind of heavy-handed, overstated stuff in this movie is in, like Revolutionary Road or Jarhead. And I mean, I haven't seen Road to Perdition in a long time since it came out in theaters, and so maybe I'd want to revisit that. But I think those movies or even 1917, which is also a big action spectacle, but I think has that seriousness to it. The balance there in Skyfall, because he brings some of that serious heaviness to the James Bond character, but also delivers on the action spectacle stuff, that to me is like the perfect balance, and I really do think that's his best film.
Cool. I would want to revisit Road to Perdition also. I haven't seen that, but I really loved Revolutionary Road. I think that's one of Kate Winslet's best performances, and she doesn't get the credit and that she deserves for that. Away We Go, that's an underrated
Away
movie,
We Go is
right?
nice, yeah, and that's one that I think he sort of like, he's not prolific, and he spends a lot of time developing movies and stuff. And that was one where he just kind of did it quickly. And maybe that worked out for the best because it was a breezy, nice film.
Yeah, but 1917 was a huge deal. Roger Deakins, obviously the cinematography to make it wasn't all one shot, right? It was supposed to.
It looked like it was one shot, yeah.
So the new one he's got, Empire of Light, is a love story set around a beautiful old cinema on the south coast of England in the 1980s. That could be fun.
Sure, it could be.
And then Allison Janney won her Oscar, so we're happy about that.
Yeah, Allison Janney is great. Again, she's a kind of a small part of this film, but a memorable one.
Yeah, she's very memorable in this movie. Hey, one thing about Sam Mendes is he worked for scale because this was his first movie, $150K, and then after all the taxes and paying agents and everything, he took home like $38,000. What a good bet for him.
Yeah, I mean it paid off later. I'm sure he got a lot more money than that for directing his later films. And Alan Ball has not done much in movies, but I mean, he's a huge TV showrunner. He kind of got 6 Feet Under, I think, pretty much right after this, based on the strength of this. Also ran True Blood for a million seasons.
They're rebooting it already.
Yeah, whatever. And he had a third HBO series that was very short-lived called Here and Now, which I remember got terrible reviews.
Did you watch that one?
No, I haven't watched. I think I watched maybe 3 or 4 episodes of True Blood, and I've never watched Six Feet Under.
I loved 6 Feet Under. I think it has one of the best series finales that's ever been done, but I don't know if he was running the show at the time. I liked the first few seasons of True Blood, and then it just got horrible and I couldn't finish it. But yeah, he's doing things, Josh.
He is. I mean, he hasn't done much in movies. He wrote and directed a couple more movies, Towelhead, which I did see, that was kind of a controversial, based on a novel, I think, about a Middle Eastern immigrant. And fairly recently, a movie called Uncle Frank that was an Amazon original that I think, like this, was partially inspired by some elements of his life. And it's a gay character who is not repressed like Chris Cooper's character, but I think maybe has to kind of keep it on the down low or whatever. So that movie got decent reviews, but I did not see it.
I didn't see it either, but I do like the song Baba O'Reilly by The Who, which was in every commercial.
That is the most important aspect of this here.
Well, so, Josh, I mentioned Brian Raftery, and in the last sentence of the chapter on American Beauty, I think this is an interesting way to sum it up, because he was talking about the backlash, right? And he says, mainly the bashers thought the whole thing was just too cartoonish. Who would believe that Nazi sympathizers would be living in picket fence America, or that a middle-aged square like Lester could be such a sleazy creep, or that everyone in America was just so angry? It sounds very much like the last 4 years,
Yeah, okay. But see, to me, the problem isn't that it's unbelievable or cartoonish. It's just that it's in a way that it's so obvious and
Right.
heavy-handed
Over
about
the
it.
oh, it hits you over the head with it.
Yeah.
I just
So
thought that was an interesting summation.
right. No, that's a fair statement. Dave, do you want to say anything about the legacy of that score, that Thomas Newman score?
Yeah, actually, just like I said earlier, that this movie was done over and over and over again. That score became the backbone of like so many of these kinds of like quirky dramas, and even into like TV. I mean, a lot of made-for-TV movies, the scores sound exactly like this every single time.
Yeah, maybe that's part of why I found it so irritating. But as soon as it showed whatever instruments he's using or the synthesizer, the sort of like, I don't know, almost like glockenspiel sounding or
Sure.
something, like
Yeah.
it just really grated on me.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. It's over and over and over again. But I don't know. In a way, I think it's the best version of that, and so good for him.
Sure. Good for him indeed. So that is American Beauty, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can check us out on social media.
You can. I'm Jason Harris Comedy or Jay Harris Comedy on all the socials. I don't know if I have a website. If I do, it should be reassessed like some films in 1999. We're awesomemovieyear.com, Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you for the people who have left new reviews for us, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, someone said that we were youthful. So we'll take it. Much like Lester Burnham, we're here having midlife crises. So we'll
in
go
our
for
own
it.
ways,
Yes.
we've been having them for a long time.
Yes, indeed. So you can find me at joshbellhateseverything.com. Not much there. Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook and at Signal Bleed on Twitter. And listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod.
Jason, what is in our next episode?
Josh, I'm nothing if not a gentleman. And as a gentleman, I must defer to Dave because it is his pick.
Dave, what'd you pick?
My pick is the classic Office Space.
And can I just say, it's a great companion piece to this.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
So tune in next time for Office Space. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.